Earlier this month, I managed to get my hands on 2 copies of the Dawn of War board game, and let me tell you, my Blood Angels have never been happier. This thing is genuinely the best deal GW has put out in, years. These boxes retail for $40 from Barnes & Noble or $50 from Target, both of which are amazing values. Inside, you get the exact same models as come in the Honored of the Chapter kit. 3 Blade Guard veterans, 3 Eradicators, a Chaplain, a Judicar, and a Blade Guard Ancient. That's 9 models, 3 of which are characters that retail for $40 each in the year of our Lord 2025? That is legitimately nutty. I mean, that's assuming you can get your hands on one. I'm pretty sure these sold out from Barnes & Noble in 4, maybe 5 hours at best. And Target, well, I never even saw one of these in person there, and they weren't doing online ordering near me for some reason. And if you've even glanced at the prices on eBay for these things, you will instantly know why they sold out so fast. Scalpers, man, it's been bad out here. But complaints about the secondhand market aside, there's one little problem with this kit. The models inside it are easy build. And if you're new to the hobby, you may be sitting here going, well, what does that mean? When I crack open a box of Space Marines, I get options. There's legs, arm, head choices, and all these little bits that I get to choose in which order and where they go. Although I may have a set number of leg poses, changing the arms helps give things variety as it changes up the biggest factor in recognizing something, its silhouette. But at the beginning of each edition, GW likes to release these big starter boxes that come with easy build models. What that means is these are models that are intended for the absolute beginner to assemble. They're put together with pegs, meaning you only friction fit them together instead of gluing them together, because I guess that's easier? I don't know, I don't really think they're that much easier. If anything, they're kind of more annoying to put together. Another big problem is that because these are assembled with pegs, we have absolutely zero control over the posing. Now sure, everybody likes options, but why is that innately a problem? You see, we as humans have a really strong sense of pattern recognition. Because of this, when you have something the exact same standing next to each other, you're more likely to notice. 1 squad of easy build, well, that's the same as building a regular kit. 2 of the same, yeah, that's not great. But you want to know what really annoys me? When I have a generic character option who is supposed to be unique to my army with handcrafted armor like a chaplain, but they look the exact same as every other chaplain in existence. I want my guys to feel like they're mine, not like they're some cookie cutter mold that was made by a mass marketing team in Britain. So, naturally, this got me thinking. This is a great opportunity to start learning how to flex your creative muscles and to learn how to start kitbashing with a couple of simple tools that, honestly, you may already have lying around. Let's start with the easiest thing you can do, arm and head swaps. These are, objectively, the simplest thing you can do on models like this, as they require next to no effort to make work. These Eradicators don't have many options without buying the actual kit. 1 pauldron is molded onto each torso, meaning we can't even do an arm swap without extensive work, more than I'm frankly willing to put into one of these. While putting this set together, I opted out of using the heads as intended. Instead, I clipped the connecting tab off and then used some thin plastic cement to glue it in place. Something like this is incredibly minor, but does help to break up the monotony of the exact same sculpt on repeat. Still, this isn't very impressive on its own. So, later we'll come back and give these models some much needed life, but for now, let's go ahead and start building some Blade Guard. If you've got even a few kits, you'll inevitably end up with more extra bits than you know what to do with. Each kit seems to come with 50 extra arms, pouches, pauldrons, etc, etc, etc. This is always great, as it gives each kit some much needed variety. Now, some people throw these away once they're done building a box and move on. Others, like myself, hoard these to sit on like a proverbial dragon's nest of potential. While an extra arm in a kit may help your assault intercessor look different from the next, giving a pistol from a separate kit to a blade guard instantly makes him feel much different from the rest of his brothers. To attach it, I simply snip off the peg where the power sword arm is traditionally supposed to slot, and then file it smooth with my knife. To match this new arm, I also made sure to keep things consistent and cut off the handle hanging out of the holster. This was as simple as gently trimming the bulk of it away with my hobby knife, then sanding it smooth with the edge of my blade. A tiny detail like this may seem honestly inconsequential, but by having something as simple as a pistol missing from a holster, you make this model feel much more lived in, like he's part of a real world. While I was looking this guy over, I actually realized that there are quite a few purity seals on this model, more than I would have assumed going into this project. This is, admittedly, a little annoying. Purity seals are supposed to be the extra little details that help give your marine more flavor, not help be an indicator of which kit you bought him from. So I went ahead and filed this one down, which was actually a bit trickier than I thought. I first started by trimming the majority of the material away before making a slight cut on the remainder of the seal following the edge of the holster's cap. This helps give my knife a physical break, giving me a much easier time trimming down the remaining material. I also use a bit of plastic cement on the holster, as this helps smooth all of our rough cuts over by melting the plastic into place. For the next veteran, I plundered deep into my bits box and found this old sanguinary guard arm. I've been holding onto this for a long while, and I think it's time I finally use it. I found another suitably posed pistol arm and gently trimmed the wrist down with my snips. After filing the wrist flush with my knife, I then trimmed the hand from the sanguinary guard arm down. It's got a little bit of a vambrace covering some of the gauntlet, so I need to be careful here as I trim this material down. Once ready, I apply more plastic cement to both halves and join the two pieces together. As for the helmet, I'm not going to be using one here. Instead, I grab a bare head from the Blood Angels Combat Patrol and start shaving his hair down. I want this Marine to look like he's slowly falling to the red thirst, screaming at his foes in rage. So, I want his hair to be a little bit more unkempt than it currently is. We're going to sculpt this a bit later, but starting from a completely bald head is always much easier, as the raised details can sometimes get in the way of your own sculpting. This causes things to be a bit larger than you want. So, let's just take care of this now. Now, I can already hear somebody in the crowd screaming, anybody can do an arm swap like this, and yeah, that's the point. But, let's go ahead and crank up the difficulty just a little bit more. To further break up the pose on this next model, I'm going to use one of the leftover arms I didn't use on the other two Marines, then he's going to get this awesome spear from the Sanguinary Guard kit. Like before, I cut away the hand and weapon, making sure not to cut into the bracer armor that overlaps the hand. Once the majority is removed, I start trimming plastic back, trying my best to match the curve of the new hand so things will be flush. This does take a couple of attempts, making sure I don't remove too much material at once. Once things fit snugly, I glue them together with just a bit more plastic cement. The longer I sit here, the more unhappy I am with the eradicators. Earlier, I said these guys are bland because, well, yeah, they kinda are right now. So, I was sitting there thinking about what I could do to fix this when my mind started to wander to the Space Marine 2 Survivor helmet. And well, if I can't add any bits to make these guys look different, what if I remove some? Doing this is pretty straightforward, and there's a few techniques I use to make things look beaten. The first one of these is removing small chunks from edges like around the neck guard, where something like a power sword failed to injure the Marine, but still hit its target. The next is little craters, like where bolt rounds may have hit. I start this by making a sort of pilot hole with the edge of my knife. Then, I take a pin vise, which is a little handheld drill, and make a tiny little hole there. This is too clean on its own, so I rough off the edge of this crater with my knife by taking out small chunks of material. Another option is to have small slashes and cuts by gently scoring across an area repeatedly until it carves a little channel out, like I've done here across the lens of this helmet. I continued on, using these few techniques to make each of these eradicators just a bit more individual. I gotta say, I really like how this came out so far. It's not perfect, but it did give a little bit more personality to these otherwise bland sculpts. Alright, so we've covered some of the basics, now let's start getting to something with some real meat on its bones. Adding hair to our models by using some green stuff and some cheap sculpting tools. If you've never used this stuff, it's basically a ubiquitous term for a specific kind of two-part epoxy putty that is often used for sculpting small details onto miniatures. As far as tools go, honestly, a lot of these end up being very similar to each other. But if you're interested, here are the two sets that I personally use. The first is this set of metal sculpting tools made by the Army Painter. I got these just because, honestly, they were available at my local hobby shop, but they have served me very well for about a year and a half now, and I've had zero problems with them. They've got a couple of different sized knives and hooks that, honestly, will get just about anything you need as far as hard, rigid sculpting goes. Now, the next set I use are these cheap silicone color shapers from Michaels. Now, I've got to be real, because these were so cheap and from Michaels, I think just about any set that you get is going to be about the exact same. These things have smooth, flexible tips that give you really good control over softer materials like on fabrics. If you're interested in either of these sets, I'll leave a link to them down in the description. Now, this might seem intimidating at first, but this is incredibly easy to do. First, mix equal parts of your blue and green putty together. You do want to have a little squirt bottle or bowl of water on hand, as this stuff is pretty sticky and water helps to keep it from sticking to your hands and tools. As a warning, don't mix too much of this at once. This stuff takes about a day to fully cure, but can get tricky to work with in just about an hour or two. Only make enough for what you think you need, and if you need more, make more. Once mixed, tear off a small chunk, roll it out into a snake, and then flatten it out until it's pretty thin. Then, stick this stuff onto the head of your model and sketch out the shape of the hair you want. Then, I take a thin sculpting knife and begin working roughly from where the part would be. I draw small, thin lines flowing down in the same direction as the hair. After beginning your rough sketch, you may find that you need to add some additional material, like I did here to the back of the head. I have my blood angels taking some pretty heavy inspiration from power metal, so I want this hair to have some volume to it. To achieve that, I work in small lines, intersecting them in sort of layers. The great thing about hair, and why I will always recommend it as a starting point for learning how to sculpt, is that it's incredibly forgiving. There's an infinite number of hairstyles, so as long as it even vaguely looks like hair, you'll be fine. Now, a second ago, I did say that this is as easy as drawing lines, but I'm also aware of the fact that this is not as easy as it looks. This is a skill that took me a little while before I was happy with it. It requires some decent confidence in working with green stuff, and a decent knowledge of how hair wants to flow, which honestly can be kind of tricky to draw. Just remember that if it doesn't look good, you can always carve the green stuff off and try again. Nothing is beyond saving here. As I mentioned, I want this guy to feel like he's falling to the red thirst, so I did keep him a bit more unkempt. To reinforce this idea, I rolled out a very thin snake of green stuff and added it to his bangs to have a lock dangling in his face. A sort of crack in the angelic facade starting to show. For the spearman, I did a similar look, except I kept his hair long and flowing backwards. This one looks pretty properly vampiric and maybe my favorite hair I've ever sculpted. Now let's take this one step further and make a unique character. The chaplain in this box is a model that I personally really love and is one of my favorite that GW makes. But he is also just a bog standard chaplain, so let's give him some flair. To start, I want to extend his Crozius into a full-sized battle staff. The first thing I did was cut off the top of the Crozius and smooth it out. I'm not really sure why, but for some reason I decided right now was the best time to cut off the pistol arm. In order to extend the Crozius, I took a small piece of plasticard tube and one of the skulls from the Citadel Skulls box that was missing its lower jaw. I'm going to be using the skull as a kind of pommel at the base of the staff. So I first drilled a small hole into the base of the skull and then glued the plasticard tube into it. Now, in order to get this rod connected to the rest of the Crozius, we do have to do a little bit of work first. You see, just gluing the pipe onto the base of the handle here isn't going to cut it. It's going to be very fragile and have a very weak bond, falling off the first time I drop this guy. Instead, we're going to pin it. This is exactly as it sounds, using a small piece of wire to create a pin between two pieces you want to combine into one. Lucky for me, my plastic rod is already hollow, so the pin fits right in. Then we just want to drill a tiny hole the same size as our wire into the base of the Crozius. And now, instead of plastic glue, we're going to use a tiny dot of super glue as it'll adhere to the wire, filling the holes in both pieces, making an incredibly strong bond. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and attach this spare arm from the Sanguinary Guard kit. It's a little sleeker than the average power armored arm, which should fit a little bit better with the style the chaplain is wearing. To replace the pauldron, I went ahead and used one of the old Sanguinary Guard kit ones to keep him looking regal. For the top of the Crozius, I'm going to use this spare piece from the old Blood Angel upgrade sprue, which was actually intended to be used as a power pack topper. You know, I have always loved the old school back banners and power pack toppers, but I've never actually used one. So let's go ahead and fix that today. A buddy of mine gave me this spare power pack, and I've been saving it for a rainy day, so why not use it here? I took a second backpack topper, this one being a little crested chalice, and glued it into place. Conveniently, this power pack actually has a peg that fits into the back of the chaplain. That's kind of funny. The lower handle of the staff is looking a little bit plain, so I went ahead and added some jewelry chain using some super glue. The only real important thing about this is to make sure your wrap is consistently spaced, otherwise it can look a bit janky. While I'm at it, the chains on Titus' arm look awesome in Space Marine 2, so let's go ahead and steal that idea. One last thing to add that makes any character look better is a hood and a cloak. I want to retain the iconic skulled helmet look, so I'm using a spare one from the Reaver's kit. I first trimmed down the head crest and the sides of the ears to make sure my hood will have a good shape later. Then I glued the helmet into place. Now, sculpting a cloak from scratch may sound really tricky, but this is honestly one of the easier things that you can sculpt onto a model. Go ahead and mix together some more green stuff, except this time we're gonna let it stiffen up just a little bit. Set it aside for about 30 minutes before rolling it out. You can use just about anything for this, but I'm gonna be using a little wooden dowel here. Once rolled out thin, take your knife and cut out a little trapezoid. I'm making mine wider on the bottom than the top is, with the top being just about the width between the two pauldrons on his back. I start by gently applying the putty to his back before shaping it with this little cone-shaped silicone tool. One reason green stuff is so useful is because it can turn a mundane model into something way cooler than it was by making it more dynamic. So, here, I'm making sure his cloak is nice and billowing, like he's in some pretty heavy wind. Just keep shaping things slowly until you're nice and happy before moving on to the hood. For that, I cut out another, much smaller rectangle and apply it to his head. I want his mask to be showing without the hood being completely pulled back. So, I had the sides of his hood gently blowing back from the breeze, helping to reveal some of his face. To sell this as cloth, I also added some wrinkles and folds to the side before realizing that his power pack was slipping slightly. Oh well, let me just fix that and casually rip the entire cloak off. Well, shit. That's not good. At the end of the day, no matter how good you are at something, you are inevitably going to make a mistake. Here, I could have easily cut this footage out, fixed everything off camera, and pretended everything went exactly according to plan because I am oh so great and perfect of a hobby YouTuber and you should listen to me. But that is very rarely how life goes. Honestly, I think this is actually very important to show, because, well, this happens to everybody. And yeah, I'll admit, this pissed me off to no end. It was such a stupid little mistake that ruined such a great looking cloak. Honestly, I should have left the power pack off until everything was dry, but I just got really excited to see the model finished, and now here I am trying to pick up the pieces. I'll even admit, there was that split-second irrational voice in the back of my head going, well, you screwed up. Now it looks bad. You don't want to finish this. Throw them in a drawer, forget about it, and cancel the video. Which, honestly, is a little embarrassing to admit now in a much better headspace. But, here's the thing. I firmly believe the only difference between a beginner and a master is the perseverance to learn from your mistakes and keep trying. I know there have to be people out there, like I used to be, people who get so easily discouraged by such a simple mistake that anyone could have made because you think that everyone out there is so much better than you. And if even one person decides to keep trying because of something I've said in this video, then this was damn well worth it. What matters is not making no mistake. What matters is that I have the cloak finished and it looks good. Alright, time to get off my soapbox, let's finish this guy off. For one final touch, I wanted to add a rock for the base of the staff to rest on, so I took a small chunk of corkboard, carved it into shape, testing periodically to make sure it fit, then added a few differently sized rocks about the base to get things looking natural. With that, my little conversions are done. I hope I've shown you that kitbashing doesn't need to be big and intimidating in order to be impactful. With just a few simple tricks, you can make your models feel like your own. Gotta say, I'm really proud of how the chaplain came out, even if there was a rough patch thrown in there. And if you're at all interested in seeing the chaplain get painted in a later video, let me know. I've got some really fun ideas for what I can do to him. As well, I've also got plans for some future kitbashing videos, so if you'd like to see those, stick around and subscribe. Well, that just about does it for me today. I'm gonna get out of here now. Bye.